The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
And looking out for life on Mars, ground control to Major Jim. All these things could be yours too, if you just take another point of view. Everybody's got a pair of wings they can't see. I got wings that you can't see. I have wheels on my feet. Well, I feel free on these wings you can't see. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our first in a series of webinars and web conferencing meetings that are taking the place of the classes for your real district assembly. I would like to start off with a little housekeeping. This is a webinar, so if you have any questions, please use the chat box, and our moderator, which I want to thank for helping me out, Bill Bowen, will be monitoring the chat box and asking your questions when appropriate. So let's get started. You know, in today's world, we're doing a lot of these different webinars and web conferencing meetings, but there's a lot of things that are going wrong in some of them. So here's a fun little video that shows what can happen if you don't know what your place is and what's going on at the meeting. So let's start off with a fun video. Hopefully that hasn't happened in any of your meetings. So let's get started with the webinar. So today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about a few things. We're going to talk about the different platforms and types of meetings that you can be using online. We're going to talk about some equipment requirements, and we're going to talk about running the meeting. Okay. So first of all, I'd like to get a little poll to find out what you guys are doing out there, and so I have an idea of what the experiences of meetings in your club is. So the question is, how are you using online meetings? Please click all the ones that will work for you. So are you using it just for club meetings? Are you using it for committee meetings? Using it for socials? Or have you not started yet? Give you a few seconds to do this. All right, I'm going to close it out here in just another couple of seconds. So here are the results. 93% of you are using it for club meetings, 64 for committee meetings, 57 for socials, and 7 haven't started yet. Well, that's great. Let's go ahead and move on then. So what are the different types of meetings that you can have. The first one is live streaming. And the way I think that the best describes this is, say that there's cameras like at a TV show in the days of live broadcasts, or even some of The Voice or some of those other type of shows where there's cameras that are recording and broadcasting at the same time. The audience just sits there and watches the things that are happening. This way is a one-way communications. It doesn't allow the participants at all to give any feedback or communicate, but it just allows your meetings or situation to be broadcast out to the world. Web conferencing is probably the most common thing that our clubs are doing. I have the pleasure of going out on a lot of different meetings, and what I see is most people are using web conferencing. This is like having a conference room table, or a board meeting where everybody has their own camera and mic, and they are able to share what's on their screens. In other words, say that one person has a PowerPoint or a file or something like that, they can bring it up on their screen and share it with all the rest of the participants. This allows you to look at all the people that are participating, and it also allows you to hear all the people. Some of the downsides of using web conferencing, which you may have seen, is maybe someone doesn't have an appropriate internet connection or a good mic setup or other equipment issues, and so you can't hear them when they do try to speak. It also the other thing is web conferencing is trying to capture the voice of the person that is trying to talk. So if multiple people are talking, sometimes you hear bits and pieces of different conversations, and you can't understand the point of the speaker. And the last thing is you can see them. So if they do something crazy, like in our video, then those things are seen by everyone. It also shows the people what they're doing and whether they're paying attention. What we're using today, is a webinar. A webinar kind of combines the two. It is a one-way path out to the participants or to the attendees, and where a speaker or a small group of speakers can deliver the presentation, and the attendees can participate by submitting questions, which you can do here by using the chat box. They can use polls like we did, and we can show you different things. We can also allow each of the panelists to provide information, share their screen, and do other things like that. The benefit of a webinar is you don't have all those equipment issues that some people may find don't work very well for them or don't like listening to, but you lose that inner connectivity that you have in web conferencing. Webinars are big when you have large groups. I was on a webinar that Club Runner put on where there was over 500 attendees. We would have never been able to see all the different people, even if we tried in that particular situation. What I find is web conferencing works really good for small groups. Sometimes on larger groups, it becomes more difficult to manage, but we'll talk about how you might be able to do that later on. So some of the platforms you can do: live streaming. Facebook Live is one of the ways that clubs in our district have been using the live streaming for quite some time. There's also other products such as StreamYard, which is what Brent and I did to record our video that we did recently, and OBS Studio. Web conferencing, I've been on WebEx, free conference call, GoToMeeting, Zoom, and there's tons of these different types of formats you can use. And for webinars, it's usually an upgrade. So I know that both GoToMeetings and Zoom webinars are upgrades. So you got to buy the basic package first, and then you can add the webinar section to them. So my next poll is to find out what you guys are using right now. So let's go to our next poll here. And so what platform are you using? So please select those. And actually, I noticed I made a mistake. It's not webinar, but WebEx. I know that I've been on a couple of those. Give you a couple more seconds. So here are the results. As expected, since I've been going on a lot of them, I noticed that 64% are using Zoom. That is probably the most important, the most common format today. GoToMeetings has been around longer, and you're using the GoToWebinars portion here for this meeting because that's what the district has had for years. But 7% said they're using Facebook Live, and we have 7% that so I think the same people that haven't done a meeting yet are using nothing. So thank you for responding. All right. So next, let's talk about the players you need in order to put on a successful meeting. And this is for all the different products. First is the back room. And I think this is where a lot of times clubs don't do this correctly, is they don't have a good back room. I'll give you an example of our club. We run a webinar each week, and in our back room we have two people that are doing a lot of work that that you don't see. I do the PowerPoints, I advance them, I run the videos, I run any polls that we do, and we have another person that all they do is look at the chats, because oftentimes those are hard to do if you don't have the time and effort to look at them all. So we're doing the back room, which leaves our host, which is our MC, or in our case, our president, to just operate the meeting and go through what he needs to do. I would liken this to, say, one of our big events. If you came to the district conference or the foundation dinner, what would you see? You'd see a group of people in the back of the room that are running the AV. They're the ones that are making sure the mic levels are working. They're putting the different things up on the screen, and sometimes they even control the lighting. So those people are important. If one person is trying to do everything, it's often hard to do that. And so the best thing that can work, if it works possible, is have as many people as you think needed to do that. By having the three of us work together, the two backroom people and the host for the Fair Oaks meeting, it runs the meetings a lot smoother. And I know that Roseville does the same thing. They have multiple people. So just think about that. Who's going to help run it, and in most cases, it should not be the president. The other thing is the panelists. These are the people that are going to come in and speak to your club and talk about different things. The panelists may want to share their screen. Maybe you want to share the information for them. Depends on what kind of format. They should know how to turn their mic on and off if you're closing the mics off. You also they should know how to use their camera and make sure that their camera is on when they're speaking. And the last group is, of course, the attendees. This is your audience. These are the people that you are trying to put on a good show for, and hopefully they appreciate what you're doing. Now, these terms are kind of generic terms because each one of the sites may call them different things, but just know that you need to have these people involved in your discussion when you're deciding what you're going to do in a meeting. Some of the hardware. Your host and back room are going to need a little bit more hardware than the other participants. Generally speaking, you want them to either be using a desktop or laptop. They need to have a good internet connection, and we'll talk more about that in a minute, a mic, and a camera. I will also tell you from working in the back room a lot, as a back room person, it's also nice to have multiple screens because of the fact that, I may have a poll coming up that I got to do for a second, so I want to stage that. Same with the next video. The other thing that I may be having up there is the chats, so I can take a look at that. I want to see who the attendees are. And all those things I want to be able to look at. And by having them spread out over multiple screens makes it so much easier for me to do my job and be prepared for what's happening next. Bandwidth is, I think, the greatest issue that meetings have. You have to remember that your internet connection is only as strong as that bandwidth. So think about this. If you had a pipe and you're trying to run water with it, at some point you max out the amount of water that can go through that pipe. If you don't have any extra room, if you start doing something that takes more, that has a higher requirement, it can't be done. Some of the common things that use more bandwidth that can cause issues is videos. If you're running videos, they take more bandwidth. And sometimes your software. We had an interesting thing where we had one of our speakers, every time he advanced his PowerPoint slide, the additional need on the bandwidth made it so that we could not hear him speak correctly. He became jerky, and it was so disconcerting that it almost looked like he was having a stroke. So remember all that. The other thing you have to remember is bandwidth is for other things that may be on your computer, not just the meeting. Do you have Dropbox or the box? Do you have Apple Cloud, or do you have some other cloud software like OneDrive? If they go during your meeting and they start downloading a file or uploading a file, then guess what? You're taking bandwidth. Before I started this meeting, I used Dropbox. I used my mailbox. I closed both of those so that they would not be operating during this meeting to keep my bandwidth as high as possible. The other thing you have to remember about is, again, it's a household internet service. So is your spouse downloading a file in another room? Are they streaming a video? Those things can also affect your bandwidth and cause problems. So just know that these are all things you have to look at. If you need more bandwidth, you can often order it from your provider if that's important to you. The panelists and attendees, their needs are a lot less. They can use a desktop or laptop also. They can also use a phone, as long as they have a good internet connection and a mic and a camera if you want them to participate. The one thing you have to remember about is audio feedback. So you need to make sure that their equipment works properly. We'll talk about practicing later on. And then you should have them consider muting their phone or computer when they're not talking. And we'll go into reasons why for that soon also. So the next reason is your meeting gold. I like this little cartoon. It says, due to social distancing, we are exploring alternative rotary meeting formats. Someone speaking on a beach. The first thing I think you need to do before you decide to have a meeting is decide why. What is the purpose? What are you trying to do? Are you trying to replicate your club meeting? Are you just trying to have a time where people can communicate back and forth, see each other, and communicate? Is it for some other reason? Is it a training meeting? Are you trying to conduct a board meeting? Doesn't mean that every one of your club meetings are the same, but you have to understand the purpose of that particular meeting that you're planning. Once you understand that why, you need to understand your message. What are you trying to get out? Are you going to be using PowerPoints? Are you going to be using videos? How are you going to use multiple speakers? All these things come in on the message that you're trying to communicate to your audience. And then your audience, what are they willing to put up with? What are they looking for out of the meeting? What can you provide them? And then how do you adjust your message to fit your audience? And one thing I always believe in, because, and it's the first committee I started as district governor, is do you have a creative team? How can you do things? In my club, we recently are, for next week, changing a couple little things that we've been doing because our creative team came up with some different ideas of things we want to do. Our meetings have changed because as some of the people on the creative side have said, can we do this? Can we do that? And we continue to upgrade and change our weekly meetings so that they are as fun and entertaining as possible. Once you've decided all this, this is when you decide the type of meeting you're going to put on and your platform. Again, one size doesn't fit all for all meetings. So maybe you're using your web conferencing like we do for our socials. We use webinars for our meetings. And then before this, when we were meeting live, we were doing live streaming. So different platforms and types can work for your club. You just have to know the other things that you're trying to achieve. So the first part about setting up a meeting, if you haven't done it before, is setting up the meeting in advance. Each software works differently. And for today's meeting, what you did was we sent out a link that you could register for this meeting. And then when you came on this morning, you could have registered up until the meeting started, or even after it started, and go through the registration process and come on to the meeting. This is the time you might set up. Some softwares have things like, well, can you have a poll? If so, you have to put that poll in advance. How do you set up the video? In GoToMeeting webinars, the way we run the videos, so if I seem a little clunky on this, is I'm doing a Zoom meeting every week, and the way they handle the videos is a little bit different. So each one of them has their own unique features and so on, and you need to do it. Sometimes they also allow you to turn off and on certain options. Some of them will allow you to turn on questions or chats, and some of them will not. Also, when people come into your meetings, do they come in with the videos? They come in muted. There's so many different ways that it can be set up, but you have to know your particular software and set it up prior to that meeting. Once you set up your meeting, you'll have a link that you can send out to the people that you would like to attend. This is something that you need to advertise, because if not, how's anybody going to come to your meeting? I also believe that when you're looking at your meetings, you have to decide who you want to come to your meeting. I know that Zoom has gotten a lot of bad press because of the fact of the Zoom bombers. As a matter of fact, I was on a RI meeting, and someone had talked about their club had been Zoom bombed. So if you just put out your advertisement and you make it open to everybody, and it's a web conferencing, then anybody can join in. Anybody can share the screen. Anybody can see what you're see themselves, and then if they can do stuff on their camera that may not be appropriate for your meeting. So how do you prevent that? Well, with the way the what you do is with Zoom is you can actually have waiting rooms or register people or do other things to make it harder for them to get in. With a webinar, it's not the case because of the fact that their cameras aren't active and they can't take control of the screen. GoToMeetings has a thing that one of the hosts has to switch to somebody else if they want to become the presenter. So just know that you need to know your software and know how to advertise it. With live streaming, there's not the concerns because it's a one-way thing, a one-way messaging. So it's hard to say how we can do that. You need to set up your players in advance. You need to know who's going to do what and how are they going to do it. The panelists shouldn't be surprised. They should know what their participation is and what they need to do. The attendees, you need to let them know, should they meet their mics. And as well as your backroom people need to know what the flow of the meeting is and how to do it. For this meeting, as well as the meetings we run in Fair we have an agenda so that everybody knows that are in the back room or panelists exactly what slides are coming up and also what kind of information is going to be talked about in the next slide so they can be prepared. Practice. Sometimes it seems like this doesn't need to be done, but if you're trying to do things and you have different people coming in and on, practice is a good thing. Every week before you do a meeting, if it's going to be something that has a lot of moving pieces, you should practice. You should have the players come on. You should make sure that they know how to turn on their cameras or turn on their mics, whatever you may be asking for them to do. If they're going to share the screen, they need to understand how to do that before the meeting, and that's you go over all those things in the practice. This is also a time that I would suggest that we practice the running through their slide set. Again, we learned the hard way where one of our presenters' bandwidth changed when they moved the slides forward. We didn't practice that. He just advanced the slides during the practice, and he spoke, but he didn't do this both at the same time. So we didn't realize that was going to be an issue until the actual session. So if you practice that, you can find out those things. And what we could have done is had him wait till the slide fully transition from one to another and then speak. The mic and camera check is important. A lot of times people come on with their cameras, and if they have too much backlighting, they become a shadow. Mics, are they going to get feedback? Or they have other problems? Is that the thing that causes them to have the issue with the bandwidth? All those things should be checked prior, and if they don't work, then you need to figure out how you're going to do it to work if those people are going to be part of your presentation. Bandwidth, again, that's the important one. Always check for the bandwidth and make sure that it's going to work before your meeting starts. The other thing I think you should look at, and we forget about if we're just transitioning from regular meetings, is you can have speakers from anywhere. I know that last week the Roseville Club had Rick Barry, Hall of Fame basketball player, who lives in the Bay Area. I'm not sure if he would have come up to Roseville for a 20-minute presentation, but they got him to come up since they're using an online meeting. In the Fair Oaks Club, we had our global scholar, who's in Arizona right now, talk to our meeting. And I know South Yuba County Sunrise Club is having one of their RYE students that was participating, I believe it was on 15 years ago, speak to their club from Brazil. So don't limit yourself to maybe the same people you would have in the past. You can also combine platforms. So like what we're doing today, you can record your meeting. If you record your meetings, it gives you a few different options. The first one is after you're done with your meeting, you can post it on YouTube if you have a YouTube channel. You can post it on Facebook. so people can watch it later. If you have it on YouTube, you can embed it on your website. So if you have a great speaker, you can show afterwards and show the public why they should be coming to your club meetings and learning more about your club. The other thing is on Zoom, one of the features I like about Zoom is it allows you to not only broadcast a Zoom meeting, but do the same on your Facebook Live. So in the case of, I know, a Laguna Sunrise and the Fair Oaks Club, we're using that option. So not only are we having the Zoom meetings, but we're also, people can join us on Facebook Live. What we found in Fair Oaks is about 200 people see, or 200 or more people. One meeting, we had almost 1,200 people actually saw our Facebook Live was available. And then we get a couple hundred people that actually join it. Some only for a few seconds. Some stay for the whole meeting. So it allows you to capture a bigger audience. This can also help you if you are worried about the Zoom bombers. So if you do it live, you don't have to send out a full invite to those people. They can just come on and watch you on Facebook Live. But make sure you advertise it on Facebook, because that's, if they don't know it's coming, they may not be looking for it when it happens. And you know, in the future, believe it or not, I think we all know that sooner or later we'll start gathering together live. What I want you to consider is, when we start gathering together live, can we use some of these formats along with our live meetings to increase our audience, increase our retention, and find us new members? You know, for many years now, both the Roseville Club and the Fair Oaks Club have done all their meetings on Facebook Live. It's just another way of reaching out to our communities and letting them know the good things we're doing. It also allows our members, if they cannot make it to the meetings, to participate in the meeting by watching it. It's amazing that we can do this, but maybe what you want to do is use one of the other formats when you come back, and maybe bring in a speaker from someplace else, or use other ways of using this for different types of formats. So think about it. You know, once we can gather again, don't forget about how important these platforms are for you to use. So I'd like to go with a couple of meeting etiquettes. First, everybody should know that when you're not speaking, you need to mute yourself. I heard of interesting, kind of funny story from a friend of mine that was talking about how they're having a birthday party for his grandchild. And he said what he never had realized before is that the other grandmother spoke so much. And she would just carry it on, and she just blocked out everybody's other conversation. So letting people have a chance to talk and muting them out is important. It's also important because, again, all the software is designed to try to capture the main person speaking. It's designed for one person to speak at a time. With the occasion of some of the more sophisticated live streaming events, where they're designed to take on different voices, your conferencing software is designed to try to pick out one person. That's why you may hear, you know, one word from one person, another word from another person, or maybe it just goes silent. People are getting broken into because they make a little noise. All those things can make it very difficult for the attendee to listen to. The other thing, if you don't mute yourself, is I was on a Zoom meeting where a person's dog started barking in the background. So this took over the meeting because it was loud enough, and the meeting zoomed on it. But in addition to that, the person yelled at the dog to be quiet. So they took over the meeting and took away from the speaker because they were hogging all the bandwidth for the microphone at that time. So knowing if she had just simply turned off her mic and muted herself, then everybody else would have been able to hear the speaker and they wouldn't have been interrupted. Be on time. I think this is important because, a lot of times certain meetings are waiting for more people to show up. And that's not, just like any other meeting, that's not really fair to the people that did show up on time. And it's also difficult because of the fact that if you're not on time, people get antsy. And sometimes they don't want to come back. So try to be on time. Ensure your technology works correctly. Again, if the mic is giving a squealing sound, people do not want to hear that. If they can't hear you speak because your mic's not working, they don't want that either. So make sure the technology works and use technology to engage your participants. Sometimes it's something as having those polls, showing videos, using other things that's going to make your meetings more entertaining. As we talked about before, choose a proper software and have hardware that works. Again, if you get Zoom and you have some of their other functionalities, it allows you more flexibility in how to make your meetings more entertaining. Frame the camera correctly. Make sure that people sit, when you're look at yourself on the screen, make sure you're sitting appropriate distances so that we're not just seeing your mouth, and you're the proper distance away. Have the right lighting. As we discussed before, no one wants to see a shadow figure except for maybe someone that's looking for ghosts. So make sure you have the lighting. One thing I didn't mention in the practice, but if you practice at a different time than your meeting, you may need to reevaluate this lighting. So have all your panelists or participants come in early enough that if maybe the lighting is different and they got a lot of backlight because of the time of day that your meeting is, which was different than when they did the practice, have them come on early enough so they can change that. The most common problem is too much backlight, so sometimes they need more light facing them. Some don'ts. Don't delay the start time or waste time during the meeting. I'll give you a great example, unfortunately, of this, is last weekend, RI put on a telethon. They didn't start that telethon for 10 minutes. I tell you that I was about 30 seconds to a minute away from shutting it off. Because they started late, they also ended late. And what I noticed is because up in the corner, it showed how many people were on their live stream event. At about that hour point from the original start time, a lot of people dropped off. They probably lost a few hundred people during that time frame. So try to start on time, try to end on time. Don't forget that appearances matter. As we saw in the funny video, there's the joke about standing up or not having pants on, but you have to remember that when the cameras are live, they're going to see what you see. And don't allow your camera positioning to become a distraction. I've changed kind of my background. As you can see, it's a rotary symbol down there because there's a photo out there that maybe people would be paying more attention to. Remember that things happen, because I've been on webinars where people have been talking about stuff that's in someone's background. And if there's things that are a distraction, you may be losing the attention of your audience. The last thing is don't multitask during your video meetings. It's interesting that some people forget that they have a camera on them. They'll pick up the phone. They have their mics off and muted, but they're picking up their phones. You can tell they're working on their computer, and that's not necessarily nice for the presenter. It would be like at a meeting if you started playing, you picked up your phone and took a phone call during someone's presentation. It doesn't make the presenter feel really good. So try not to multitask during the meeting. With that, do we have any questions, Bill? Give him a second to turn on his mic.
Well, Ray, you were talking about technology and issues, and I sent you a message because something seems to have happened with the chat bar here. The only people I can apparently message with are you as the organizer and presenter. So I'm not sure if there are questions. I'm not seeing them in my chat feed.
That is interesting. I do see that there was a question here. There's a questions on meetings that they're attending or running, but I don't know more about it. Maybe you can, let's see if we can find Beth and get her to explain her question here. Actually, I got a couple people that said they had questions. So let's just see if we can open up the mic here. Beth, you had a question?
Yeah, that question about whether we're attending or running the meeting had to do with the first poll question. Because personally, I've attended a lot of meetings, but I haven't run meetings, which is the main reason I felt this would be an important class to go to.
Oh, okay. Did we answer your questions about running a meeting?
Yeah, in general. I mean, there's a lot of technical stuff that I need to get figured out. But anyway, and then the other question I had also was if what participants need a high bandwidth? Is it required only by the backroom team or also by all the hosts and presenters? Do they all need the same capabilities? That was my other question.
It really depends on whether they're what they're using. So bandwidth will vary, depends on what they're doing. So if you have someone that is just speaking to the club and they're not using their camera, they can have a lower bandwidth than a person that's also using their camera at the same time. If they're running other software, they're going to need different needs. An attendee who's just watching generally doesn't have any problems because they can, if they shut off their mic, they'll be able to watch everything with no problems.
Yeah, I knew about that on the attendees, yes, but I wasn't sure how it applied. So it's whatever the person is doing that is, whether they are actually, I mean, the back room person, I guess, has to have them all, though?
Yeah.
Even though they're not necessarily presenting?
Generally speaking, if they're running the videos and so on, like I do at our club meetings, yes, you need to have a higher bandwidth than would maybe somebody else. That's why it's so important to practice and find that out, because I'll tell you, the Fair Oaks Club, we've had a few of these issues and we figured them all out by doing it and thinking that we had it all correct. And then when it came to the meeting, it didn't work out appropriately. So we made adjustments. So the practice is probably the number one thing.
Great, thanks.
You're welcome.
I do have a question, Ray, from the audience. Someone texted me. We have a member who is allowing us to use her Zoom account to run meetings. Is she the person that needs to handle PowerPoints and videos, or is that something that can be handed off to other people?
It depends on the software and so on. Generally speaking, with if they're using Zoom and they're using web conferencing, anybody can be that backroom person. If they're using Zoom webinar, they have to be a panelist or I believe they call it a host in order to do it. So it depends on what software they're using. Same with GoToMeetings. I believe their meeting module allows them to allow anybody to do that. The webinars is much more restricted on the people that can do that. So the quick answer is, depends on what the software is. The backroom the head background person may need to log in under that person's login if that's required. I go back to practice will allow you to know what options each one has.
Thank you.
I got a question from Joanne Lemon. I'm going to open up her mic. Joanne? Well, maybe she doesn't have a question. I'm going to close her mic. I'm going to open up the mic for Leanne Renero.
Oh, I
My
texted Bill.
question.
Oh,
Bill, can you please ask the question?
all right. We got that one taken care of. Thank you, Leanne. I'm opening up the mic for Bob Deering. Bob, do you have a question?
No, I don't, Ray.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Mary Jo Edmond, I just saw her raise her hand.
Hi, Ray. My question has to do with, I have difficulty with lighting. I'm the host in our GoToMeetings, and the lighting in my office where I have my computer and everything is not good. It's got a lot of backlighting. What are some suggestions for those of us with lighting challenges?
Well, there's, sometimes it's simple as bringing a lamp over there and just have that, kind of right next to your monitor, because you're probably looking at your monitor and your camera. And often that'll throw enough light onto your face to overcome the backlighting. If the backlight, if you can close a curtain or shades on that and then use the lamp, you can do it. There's also some unique lights that I've seen out there that are round, and they're really designed to light your face up as you're doing a meeting like this. And even if you're using your cell phone as a camera, there's a stand so you can put your camera in the center of the light. So I would just look at different lamps and stuff like that that might shut off. Maybe take off the shade on the lamp if that does a better job to light your face up. And then you should practice at times when it's the same time that you're running your meeting, so that lighting coming in into your room is the same. So maybe if you're doing, if you're doing it for your breakfast meeting, the day before at the same time, just turn on your camera on your screen and test out different lamps and stuff like that and see what works best. Does that help?
Yes, and a second part of that question, I know there are some platforms that allow you to put up like a green screen or something. Which ones are those?
That's Zoom, that allows you to put a background up.
Only Zoom?
Only Zoom that I know. That's the only one I've seen that has that option. It's called a virtual background. Now, one of the things you have to be curious or worried about with your different backgrounds is the coloring. I forgot which background I was using. I think I was using my white district background on a Zoom meeting. And because of my color of the shirt, it looked really weird because you could just see my face with like no body. So also test those out. There's plenty of different backgrounds you can, if you Google search Zoom virtual backgrounds, there's a lot of people do it. Disney's put out a bunch of ones, Pixar, and then just other groups have put out ones, or else you just take your favorite picture and put it in your background.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Have a good day.
Let's see. I'm going through here. Denise Williams, do you have a question?
Are you talking to me?
If you're putting in as Denise Williams.
Oh, well, I just saw an unmuted thing. I sent over a couple questions. Can you see all of us even though we can only see you?
No, we can't, because on this particular software program, the software program is muting all cameras.
Okay. All right. So that was just a curiosity thing based on your first video, your first slide of like audio versus video. It's good to know what format you're on so that you can make the intelligent choice or the non-repercussion choice.
Yes. Webinars always turn off the cameras. Again, that's a way that you can eliminate yourself from having being Zoom bombed. So that's one of the reasons why our club chose to do that. Is we can advertise our webinar out there, our weekly meeting to everybody because of the fact that we don't have those concerns. Remember, you also have a control so that whether it's a Zoom meeting or it's like that, you can turn your camera on or off. So if you don't want people to see you, turn off your camera whenever you join a meeting.
Okay. And then the second part of that question was just for curious, because usually like when you're attending a training or a meeting or something, you can sort of gauge the audience's response and enthusiasm to the speaker and everything. But in this format, we cannot. So could you just, though you're exciting, Ray, thank you. Can you just tell us approximately how many people are attending this session and how many of our district Rotary clubs are attending?
I can answer your first question. We have 26 people on the Zoom meeting. Unfortunately, I cannot tell you the clubs because we didn't ask for that information, so I just can see people's names. I can tell you I know that there's quite a few different clubs attending because I just know the people on it, but I wouldn't have a count on that. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. It was just a curiosity thing.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Thank you. I'm going through here. Thomas Lewis, do you have a question for us?
No, I guess what I have there is how many people are using Zoom for guest speakers.
I'll tell you that as I've gone and attended a lot of meetings, some clubs are just gathering together as a group, and some are, but I think most of them have been bringing in guest speakers. And so it varies by club, but I would say that probably of the ones that I've attended, probably 80–90% are bringing in guest speakers every week or every meeting.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. If there's any other questions, if you want to raise your hands, I cleared it all off. I'll wait a couple minutes to see if we get any other questions. Did you get any other questions, Bill?
No, I didn't get any other questions, Ray.
All right. Well, I think, oh, Bob, do you have a question now?
I do have a question, Ray. Thank you. We are really looking to go Facebook Live, maybe when we're still doing our virtual meetings, but also once we get back into our regular meeting mode, going Facebook Live. The problem we have with the place where we are, we do not have Wi-Fi. And I'm not sure that the person who has the meeting room will put Wi-Fi in. Is a hotspot sufficient to run what we're going to be doing?
I have heard of clubs that are using hotspots to do that with. So I think that, again, it depends on your plan and your service. You can do that because I have heard it working. I know that, with Facebook Live, you can run it off your club. You might have seen that when I did some of my club visits, Stacy actually did a Facebook Live off the yacht that we were on when we did our club visit in Foothill Highlands, and that was out on the river. So I was kind of surprised how well that worked. It actually worked really well. So if you're going to do that, I know that on our tablet we got to go through through the internet. But again, you could do it with your phone and do Facebook Live, and it should have all of the bandwidth you need to do that.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
None that I see.
All right. I think that's it. I want to thank everybody, especially Bill, for participating today. I want to leave you guys with another Zoom meeting. This is from Saturday, or another video. This is from Saturday Night Live, and it kind of shows what I liked about this is it shows the frustrations of people that may not feel they're technologically up to date with other people's. So you got a couple different people going on in this one, and I think that I think you'll find it fun. So let me try it. Well, I hope everybody enjoyed that video, and it showed a few people having some frustrations. The funny thing is, last night, my wife had told me that her mom was on a training call, and someone actually did take their laptop into the bathroom. And so I just thought that was a joke, but it actually does happen, I guess. So anyway, thank you all for joining us. If you have members that would like to see this, we have recorded this meeting, and we will be posting it on the district website. Thank you. Have a great, safe, and healthy day.